Great. Thank you so much, Maya. Thanks everybody for being here. It's really a pleasure. And I want to just welcome everyone and tell you that I am very pleased to be here and be doing this. And I am an ecologist in Vermont, as Maya said, recently retired from the Vermont Land Trust. So it's really a pleasure to be doing this for the Vermont Land Trust today. And I want to just apologize for a little, Maya said we're all Zoom professionals, but I have a little technical problem here, which is that you can see the taskbar at the top of my screen. And so that's all right. We're just going to go with it. But what I want to do today is talk about wildflowers in winter. And I've had actually a couple of questions from people as I've been preparing for this talk, and even today as I was outside taking pictures, asking, for example, a picture of some berries. Well, those aren't like the berries right behind me. Those aren't flowers. And I just want to explain one thing before we get started, which is that flowers have, flowers have many parts, including fruits. So flowers in the summer have sepals, the green parts on the outside, the petals, the very colorful parts. And then inside that, there are stamens, which produce pollen. And then interior to that, there's a pistil, which matures into the fruit. Those fruits often remain on the plant throughout the winter. And inside the fruit are the seeds. So for example, a pea pod is a fruit, and inside the peas are the seeds. So think of this as what we're seeing now is everything but the sepals and petals for the most part. The petals are long gone on most plants, most flowering plants, but we've got other stuff that remains. We've got the fruits, we've got the stems, we've got the stalks. And so that's what we're going to see today, but it is part of the flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some different habitats where you might see wildflowers in the winter, starting from just driving down the road and then going into some wetlands, onto shores and into meadows and into bogs and into really interesting places. So that's what we're going to do here this evening. That's what we're up to. I have a good amount of a good number of slides and a lot of plants to show you, and I'm going to sort of just try to give you a little tour. So and then another thing is this is not about mosses, which are beautiful in the winter. It's not about lichens. It is not about ferns, and it's not about mushrooms. These are all things that we can see in their glory in winter, but this is about flowering plants, which vary from little tiny things to very large things. But that's what we're doing here today. So there we go. Okay, so let's start with a drive down the road. So driving down the road, I'm driving down the road in Williston, and here's what I see. I see a storage unit on one side of the road. And actually, I pulled over to take this photo, but I see a bunch of plants on the side of the road, and you might call those weeds, and some people would call those weeds, but this is one of the most common things that you will see driving down the road in Vermont right now in New England. So I just think it's worth talking about. And this is tall wormwood, which is in the genus Artemisia. And then a little in focus are some goldenrods, and this is looking the other way in the same view, and out of focus, Queen Anne's lace. Also, these are the most common things you will see on roadsides right now. You might also see things that look like this. The wispy thing is the tall wormwood, but the tall columnar thing is mullein. And so there's a picture of the wormwood. Now this is another roadside scene. This is in the Healthy Living parking lot in South Burlington. There's the tall wormwood again, and there's a close-up view of the tall wormwood. And if you look at this picture, you'll see that there are clusters. These are actually clusters of flowers. This is a plant that is in the aster family, and each one of those little units contains a number of flowers. So it's a compound inflorescence or collection of flowers, and that is characteristic of the aster family. We're going to see a lot of members of the aster family tonight, because that's a lot of what we see that's conspicuous is in that family. But here we're going to go to another family, to the parsley family, to probably the most conspicuous beyond after the tall wormwood. I would say that Queen Anne's lace is probably the most conspicuous thing that you'll see on the roadsides in Vermont right now. And this is just a very distinctive plant, and you'll recognize it. Everybody knows what this is, or so many people know what this is, with the umbrella-shaped inflorescence, and it has a white flat top cluster in the summer. This is not a native plant. I'm only going to show a few non-native plants. Mostly we're going to be looking at native plants, but the ones by the roadside, some of them are native and some of them are not. This is not. It's also not invasive. It's a lovely roadside plant. And here's what it looks like when it's covered with snow. And there's another view of it without seeds. And there's a close-up look with one of the seeds hanging on. Actually, that is not a seed, that's a fruit, which has a seed inside it. But look at those little spiny things that help it disperse. And now here's a similar thing. This is very similar with a flat top cluster, and this has got snow on it. But you see how this one branches a little bit differently than the Queen Anne's lace. This one's actually wild parsnip or poison parsnip. Those two plants are very similar, but poison parsnip is a little taller and it branches higher up on the stem. So it has more of a compound cluster at the top, and that's how you can recognize it in the winter. Another common thing, and this is the same roadside place, is this plant. Doesn't look like much in this picture. And it's the one on the left here. The one on the right is the mullein, but the one on the left is evening primrose. Now I have sent you'll be getting a list of all the plants that I'm talking about tonight. So you'll be able to go back to the talk and see a list of all the plants and in their common names and their scientific names and the family that they're in. So there is evening primrose again, and there it is a little closer, growing right alongside a cattail. And when you look more closely at it, you'll see that it has, these are the fruits that we're looking at. So those 4 units are part of the pod, the fruit, and they have now opened up in the winter. And inside were the seeds, and the seeds have now been dispersed. But each one of those flowers has 4 petals, 4 sepals, 4 petals, and 4 units of the fruit pod, of the capsule, it's called. And so everything is in 4s in this family, which is the evening primrose family. And back to that same picture, that tall thing is mullein, which is a really cool plant. It's not a native plant. Evening primrose is, by the way, a native plant. A mullein is not. And there's a close look at the mullein fruit. You see those little clusters of fruit. And those look a little bit like, to me, they look a little bit like a turtle's head. And this is actually related to the plant called turtle head. There's the leaves and stem of mullein. It's sometimes known as nature's toilet paper. And you can see it's got a very soft leaf. This one is a really fun one. This is called teasel, and it is not in the same family. It's not in the aster family, but it's in a family that's right next door, so it's closely related. Really cool plant. You don't see it every day in Vermont. There's not a lot of it. It's more common in the Champlain Valley, and this one was taken in Jericho near my home just the other day when it had iced over and then snowed on top of the ice. It's called teasel because that is an abbreviation for tease wool. So this plant, this cone thing is about 2 inches tall, 1.5 to 2 inches tall. And these things were used traditionally to tease wool. Here's another one you'll see along the roadsides. This is called curly dock. You know, I don't know, I don't judge any plant. I don't say any plant is ugly, and this plant is not ugly. I think it's beautiful, but lots of people would look at this and say, it's not very pretty. But have a closer look. Look at these cool fruits. Are those not cool? And then here's a friend of mine, Tracy Sherbrooke, who took this massively awesome, very cool picture of the fruits of this plant. Rumex crispus or curly dock, and those wings on the seeds are meant to, again, to help the seeds disperse. This is in a family, the buckwheat family, that is very distinctive. And one of the things that's distinctive about it is that there's a sheath around the stem in all plants in this family. And you can see that ring around the stem in this plant. Now, here's another thing that you'll see on roadsides, not native, incredibly invasive. This is giant reed or phragmites growing in a power line right along a roadside. It's pretty, but it's invasive, but very distinctive, very recognizable. And now going back to the buckwheat family, this is a tiny, tiny thing, only about 1 foot tall, called joint weed that grows in roadsides. Now we're going to go to a different, slightly different habitat, to fields and meadows. So moving into fields and meadows, sort of away from the roads now a little bit. And we're going to see a lot of goldenrods when we look into the meadows, a lot of different kinds of goldenrods. And there's a couple dozen different kinds of goldenrods in Vermont. They're very hard to tell in the winter. There are a few that are distinctive, which we'll talk about, but mostly there's a few that really kind of look alike, with this very classic wand-like inflorescence at the top of the plant. And a lot of goldenrods have this. But when you look more closely at a goldenrod flower at this time of year, this is what you'll see. And this is the evidence, or the remnants, again, of several flowers. In this case, there's probably 6 or 8 flowers in this one unit, surrounded by a group of leaf-like things. And if you look at, and here's one where the seeds have not dispersed, so the seeds are still attached. This is another goldenrod, and those actually things that have the plumes on top are fruits that have seeds inside, and the plumes again are meant to help them disperse on the wind. But that's what you will see if you look closely at a goldenrod right now. Another thing you'll see if you look at goldenrods right now, just driving down the road, you can see these things, these balls on the stem of goldenrods. And these balls are caused by a gall fly, a fly that enters the stem in the early summer and matures into a larva during the course of the summer and then through the winter. And late in the winter, it actually emerges through a hole in that ball. But you'll see these balls throughout the winter. And there's one with the hole in it where the insect has emerged. Now, sometimes that hole is actually made by another insect, by a parasitoid wasp that goes in there and eats the fly, and then makes its own nest in there and takes its home. Very interesting, and that's what it looks like on the inside, and that's what the fly looks like. Another kind of gall or funny growth on goldenrods is this one. This is caused by the goldenrod gall midge. Neither of these kill the plant or hurt it. It still flowers and produces fruits, but it just causes an unusual growth form in the plant. And there's the goldenrod gall midge that causes that funny growth form. Now, here's a couple of asters. This is New England aster, and there it is close up, and there's its stem, very distinctive. There's one called flax-leaved aster, growing in a dry place in Colchester. And asters and goldenrods are you can see this thing looks just like the goldenrod thing that we saw, right? Except that there's a few more flowers. So asters and goldenrods really are not very different from one another. They're very closely related. And the differences are mostly that the goldenrods have fewer flowers in each group, and asters have a few more, and usually are colors other than yellow or white. Here's another, this one's called heath, a calico aster, another picture of calico aster, and then another member of the aster family that we all know and love is burdock. And all of the asters and goldenrods I just showed you are native plants. This is not native. And this one loves to stick to us. So it has this mechanism for getting around by sticking to mammals, including humans. Another member of this family is tall blue lettuce, which is one of my favorite plants. Again, some people would not consider this beautiful, but I do. And this grows to about 8 feet tall. It's a really beautiful plant that has this beautiful pale blue flowers in the summer. And right now, this is what it looks like. And there again, you can see those plumed seeds, actually fruits, but let's call them seeds for convenience. And that are getting ready to fly on the wind. That's how many members of this family disperse their seeds. Here's another plant that that you might see commonly around, and that is spotted brown knapweed, and it's a plant that is a non-native and quite invasive plant. When I first learned this plant, I loved it. It is called star thistle. I think it's got a very beautiful pattern to the way that the group of flowers is made. But then later I learned it was a kind of noxious weed, especially in other parts of the country. And there it is close up. Another common plant that you'll find in meadows is vervain. This is blue vervain, and really distinctive and recognizable by those very, very narrow flower stalks. And look, there's a goldenrod gall right next to the vervain. And there's another species of vervain. So there's 2 species of vervain in Vermont. This is blue vervain, and this is white vervain, a much more delicate, open inflorescence. And both of these just grow in sort of ordinary meadows, edges. And then here's the plant that I sort of can't get quite enough of, which I love. And I know so many of us love this plant. And this is common milkweed. There it is with the snow falling on it. And very recognizable at this time of year. And there it is slightly earlier in the year, with the pods opening up. And this photo was actually taken just a couple of days ago. And it's interesting because this pod has not opened yet. The seeds are still really closely packed in there. And those are seeds, and this is a fruit. That whole pod is the fruit. And the seeds are still packed in there. The other interesting thing about this photo is that it was taken at the country store that's a half a mile up the road from me, right in front of the store. It was just, and milkweed grows. I live in a community, I'm fortunate to live in a community where wild plants are encouraged to grow in public places. And so right in front of the country store is this patch of milkweed, which is lovely and a beautiful thing. And there's lots of places in Jericho Center that have wild plants like this. And there it is dispersing its seeds. And there it is with the seeds all dispersed. And so this is the inside of that pod after the seeds have all left, and there's this sort of divider left in the middle. And there it is with the setting sun behind it. Okay, well, and now I'm going to go to some plants of thickets and edges, and that's a sort of general term, but I'm going to show you some places that are just sort of jumbly, not woods, not fields, but edges, thickets. And one of the common things in thickets is this plant called virgin's bower. And this is a vine. It's a herbaceous vine that grows up and over other things. Oops. And there was another photo, but I must have taken it out. But anyway, this is, and I'll get to this later, but here's another thing. This is this is a purple flowering raspberry growing right in my driveway. And the stem of it looks like that. And here's another kind of raspberry. This is common blackberry, which is recognizable, more recognizable perhaps than the last one I showed you. Look at all those spines on this thing and the bluish stem. And you can recognize the berries even still there, still on, that never got taken by a bird. And there's the stem of the common blackberry. This is high bush cranberry, also known as Viburnum opulus. It's in the Viburnum family, and a lovely plant, very recognizable by its bright red fruits. It seems like the birds don't eat this much, and excuse me. But so this picture was actually taken in a place where there were birds flitting all over the place because someone had put, this is in a natural area in Colchester, where someone had put some bird seed out and the birds were just going crazy, but they weren't that interested in these fruits. And there they are again, close up. Okay, here's another one that grows on edges. I'll bet you know what this is, maybe you don't. But this is poison ivy. This is called Western poison ivy. We have two species of poison ivy in Vermont. And this is called Western poison ivy. And it was growing on the banks of the Winooski River. And look more closely at it. You see those beautiful fruits, which a friend said they kind of look like Christmas ornaments. They're these little gold fruits. And don't touch it because it can give you the same rash in the winter as it does in the summer. Absolutely. The toxic element is still there, going strong. So don't go near this thing. I went near enough to take a picture, but not near enough to touch it. Okay, here we are back to the virgin spower, and there it is again in the thicket, and there's a closer look at it. So this is what I wanted to show you. This picture shows that there are each flower. So this represents each one of these groups represents a single flower, and within each flower are several seeds. This is a member of the buttercup family, and it is characterized by having many seeds or many fruits within one flower, many separate ones. And it's not the only family like that, but it's one of the families that is like that. But look at those plumes, they're amazing. And those are, again, an adaptation for dispersal on the wind. Another really amazing thing in our thickets right now that you can see and recognize easily is wild cucumber vine, Echinocystis lobata. This is in the cucumber family. So this plant is closely related to loofah. If you look inside this pod thing, you will find that there's this very spongy thing like a loofah sponge, and that's what loofah sponges come from, a plant that is related to this. So if you look at the bottom of this, you can almost see that web-like loofah. But the spines there are meant to, again, it's a dispersal mechanism this will attach onto a mammal to move it around. Okay, another thing we'll see in thickets are bittersweets. There are two kinds of bittersweet in Vermont, and they're easily told apart. One of them is a non-native plant, and one of them is a native plant. The non-native plant, the Asiatic bittersweet, is this one, and it's incredibly invasive. It can take a tree down. I mean, literally take a tree down. It's that strong. Its vines grow up and can get quite thick. I've seen vines as thick as 5-6 inches in diameter, huge, thick vines of this Asiatic bittersweet. And so it is considered an invasive and problematic plant in some places, particularly in floodplains and along riverbanks, but it's very common. And there it is a little closer, and you can recognize this easily. It's used a lot in wreaths and decorations and so forth in the winter because it's so beautiful. So it has these red berries on the inside with a yellow husk on the outside. very distinctive and you know, easy to recognize. And there it is close up. Just a gorgeous thing. But look at this. This is similar, but the differences are that in the case of the Asiatic bittersweet, the fruits are kind of scattered around on the stem and on the plant. Whereas in this bittersweet, a different species, this is American bittersweet. This is our native species of bittersweet. The flowers are growing in tighter clusters, so they're recognizable clusters. Even from a distance, you can see these clusters. And the husks are not yellow, but instead they are orange or sometimes even red. So you can see the difference between the two kinds of bittersweet here. And there's a close-up of the American bittersweet. Again, just a gorgeous thing when you look at it close up. But it's not as common. This one I saw in Alberg Dunes State Park. I'm just growing in a thicket there. I had also seen it at the La Platte River Marsh Preserve of the Nature Conservancy, again, growing in a thicket. And it's possible that the managers of those places removed the Asiatic bittersweet and try to control non-native plants. Okay, here's something that you might look at and say, is that animal, vegetable, or mineral? What is that anyway? But look more closely at it. This is a plant called dodder, common dodder. This is a native plant, but very common in all kinds of habitats. I happen to see this in a wetland, but often in thickets. And it's a plant that vines around. It's a parasitic plant. It's literally parasitic. It does not make its own food. It sends its roots into the stems of other plants and uses the other plant to feed itself. So it's a parasitic plant, and where it grows abundantly, but it's not all that common. You don't see it that often. But these little balls, the individual the smallest unit there is, something like 1/4 of an inch across. They're little tiny things, but occur in these balls. Okay, another common thing in thickets that we all can see at this time of year is in edges, staghorn sumac, and there it is on a sunny day. Beautiful, beautiful plant, native plant, in the same family as the poison ivy that I showed you a few minutes ago. These things are both in the cashew family. Now, the poison ivy, of course, is poisonous to the touch, and the sumac is not, as you know. In fact, many people have taken that cone when it's fresh, not at this time of year, but when it's fresh. Birds love it, love those fruits, those red fruits, but you can take that cone when it's fresh and extract a juice from it that's quite astringent, sort of like a lemon juice almost. And if it's sweetened, it can make a lemonade, or if it's not sweetened, it will just be like lemon juice, but quite tasty. Okay, now I'm going to move away from the thickets and the edges to shores. Shores of lakes and rivers and all kinds of shores. And I went to a couple of different shores recently. This is the shore of Lake Champlain. This is Delta Park in Colchester. I want you to take note of this plant that is in the left part, but in the distance against the sky. It's a shrub that's growing here. And this is a beautiful, beautiful place to visit. It is just absolutely gorgeous, a favorite place for photographers to go, especially bird photographers. There's a lot of bird life there. It's a really amazing place. And not far from there is where I found another milkweed, and this is called swamp milkweed. And this is right at the mouth of the Winooski River. So that's where Delta Park is, at the mouth of the Winooski River. And this is actually on the other side, on the Colchester side, but again, a native milkweed. And this is, you can see the bridge. This is the bike bridge across the mouth of the Winooski River in the background of this photo. Another thing that I found on that shore is this thing, which is called Indian hemp. And if you look at these pods, and imagine these pods of the milkweed, quite a bit longer and narrower than they are in this picture, and hanging upside down instead of upright. you'll get this. And they're not the same thing, but they are related actually. They're not in the same family even, but they're in families right close next to each other, and they're very similar in how they behave. So, so this is called Indian hemp or dog bane. It's called Indian hemp because the stems, well, the stems are actually used for as rope or cordage. And so it's a really, which hemp is used for as well. So the stems are very, very strong and are used in making rope and so forth. But if these pods open up, you'll see that there are plumed seeds, just like in the milkweed. Now, another thing that you'll see commonly in on lake shores is this thing, which is cocklebur. And this picture was taken in at Alberg Dunes State Park. And there's a close-up look at the cocklebur. This is another member. So does it look like burdock? Yeah, it's related to burdock. They're both in the aster family, and they both have similar mechanisms for getting around. Their structure, flower structure, is a little bit different, but not too different. Interestingly, inside this single burr, there are only 2 flowers. There are 2 flowers in there, and they remain down inside that burr. And if you were to crack open that burr, you would find 2 seeds inside, 2 fruits actually, that like sunflower seeds is what they would look like. And there's separate male flowers, which were tiny and have withered now, and actually were at the top of this plant. And there's another close look at the cocklebur on the Winooski River. Another thing that was on the shore at Delta Park is this rose, which is really an interesting species because this is beach rose, Rosa rugosa, which is commonly planted as an ornamental. It's not native in Vermont, but it's not native in North America, but it's very, very commonly planted and has become naturalized widely on Atlantic shores. You know, if you go to Cape Cod or something, you'll see this all over the place. But it is, and it's not that common in Vermont as a naturalized plant. It's commonly planted everywhere. But this was growing in the wild at Delta Park, and there's its wonderful stem. Now, remember that plant that I was saying, remember this plant, that one that was off in the distance? And this is a closer look at it. This is a member of the pea family. And you can see that each of those little units is almost like a little tiny pea. This is a plant called false wild indigo. And it's a shrubby plant that grows to be, 6 to 8 feet tall and has really deep purple flowers in the late summer. A beautiful thing. Some people don't think it's native in Vermont, others do. There's a little bit of debate about that. I'm not worried too much about it because I really like the plant, and it's not particularly invasive, but there is some debate about whether it's native here or not. But very interesting thing, and there's a closer look at it. So you see those little pea pods. Another thing that you'll see commonly on shores, and I'm going to stay away from grasses and sedges for the most part, because there's a million of them, and we could spend a whole webinar talking about them. But this is called wild rye, and it's very common on lake and river shore, particularly river shores right now. So you will see this, so it's worth knowing something about it. Here's another one this one is actually rare. This is a plant called beach heather, which was growing in a sandy place near Delta Park. And there's a close-up look at it. This is a really interesting plant because it's one of the plants that came into the Champlain Basin during the time of the Champlain Sea. And it grows commonly on coastal beaches and dunes, but is extremely rare in Vermont, just growing in a few locations now. But here's one of them. Another thing that we can find commonly on shores is, and in other wetlands, is this meadow sweet. And I'll show you a couple more pictures of this later. Here's another thing. And remember I showed you the tall wormwood at the very beginning of the slideshow, that weedy thing. Well, this is a native wormwood. This is beach wormwood growing at Alberg Dunes State Park. This is an extremely rare plant. There's only about 7 clusters of it here at Alberg Dunes State Park, and they know about it and they're taking care of it, but it's really cool to see. So you can see the general resemblance to that other tall wormwood, but this one is a little bit shorter, a little stouter, and grows in a completely different habitat. Another thing that grows at Alberg Dunes State Park is beach grass, and it's the other one, another one that came in during the time of the sea invading the Champlain Basin, so during the Champlain Sea phase. And this plant has actually evolved over the course of those thousands of years since the Champlain Sea retreated into its own subspecies. This is the Champlain beach grass, so it is like the coastal beach grass, but this is a subspecies. Another thing that grows on shores, this is again at Alberg Dunes, and oh my gosh, I forgot to put credit on this photo. This is a photo taken by my friend Grace Glynn, and thank you, Grace, for allowing me to use this photo. This is called clammy weed, and this is an interesting one. It's in a family that is, well, it's related to the cultivated plant cleome. You're probably familiar with. And so if you think about a cleome plant and when it produces its fruits, it looks a lot like this. So that's what this is related to. And there is the shore at Alberg Dunes, a beautiful place to go if you can. Okay, now we're going to go to another habitat entirely. This is a bog. This is Colchester Bog. I was there the other day in the winter, a beautiful place to go. There's a boardwalk. You can get right in there and check out all the heath shrubs like sheep laurel, leatherleaf, bog rosemary. And this is called bog rosemary because the underside of the leaf, you can't really see it here, is this bluish green, sort of like rosemary, the rosemary that you use in cooking, but it's completely unrelated. This one's don't use it in cooking. Many members of the heath family are deadly poisonous, including the sheep laurel. I don't know about this one, but the sheep laurel is poisonous. And there's a closer look at the bog rosemary. Bog laurel, and this one is like the sheep laurel, but it's got 2 little opposite leaves, so bog laurel. And then the tiniest of the heath shrubs in the bog is small cranberry. No cranberries on it right now. The birds got them all. And another thing, this is not an evergreen. This is a member of the heath family, but not an evergreen plant. This is called rhodora, with beautiful pink blossoms in early summer. So worth going to Colchester Bog right now, worth going back there in June. And pitcher plants were growing beautifully there in Colchester Bog when I was there the other day. You can look more closely at the pitcher plants and see how they work. You can see the hairs that are inside the pitcher that are pointing downwards. So if an insect goes down in there and tries to climb back out, it can't get back out, and it is trapped in the juice of the pitcher plant. The juice contains a digestive agent, and it digests the insect, and no more insect, but food for plant. And this is the remnants of the flower of pitcher plant. That's all that's left. This is actually this umbrella-like thing, this sort of turned over umbrella thing, is what is the stigma, the part of the flower that attracts insects and attracts pollen. And so this is all that's left of the flower at this time of year. Another thing that can grow in bogs and fens is, and you would never recognize this, but this is actually growing in my yard because this is a commonly cultivated plant too. This is called shrubby cinquefoil. And it was encased in ice the other day, and then the snow fell on top of that. And somebody said, those look like Christmas ornaments, and they sort of do, they really do. But this is a common plant, a member of the rose family that grows in, particularly in calcareous wetlands, but commonly cultivated like the beach rose. Okay, we're gonna go to some wetlands now, and other wetlands that are not bogs or fens. And so you can see in this picture, you can see some cattails sticking up. You can see some shrubs. This wetland actually is sort of a mix of bog and other kind of wetland. It's a fascinating place near my home. But there are the cattails, common cattail. There's two kinds of cattails in Vermont, and those two actually hybridize. So there's a third, but the most common one is the one with the sort of broader, bigger cones, if you want to call them that, which are groups of many, many, many flowers. And these, you've all seen this. Each of those is a seed that is, again, got a hairy appendage so that it can disperse on the wind. And there is that meadowsweet again, and here's a closer look at the meadowsweet. So here's the fruits of meadowsweet, and this is really cool because you can see those 5 units, each of which has sort of 2 parts. Each of those is a fruit. So there's 5 fruits on each flower in this case, but outside of the individual fruits, you can actually still see the remnants of stamens, which is fascinating. So the stamens have kind of stuck around and are still there, but the seeds that were inside these pods are gone. But this is what you see remaining right now. Another plant that's related, I'm just looking at this from a distance with a different shape. Another kind, these are both spirea. So this is another spirea, and this one is steeplebush. Very similar makeup, just similar structure, but it's a narrower inflorescence. Okay, and then some wetland aster. This is flat-topped aster, which you can recognize at this time of year. Not exactly flat-topped, but it's sort of flat-topped. And if you look more closely, you can see that the flowers are arranged kind of in a flat top. But there you see the aster flower as we had seen it before, and another close-up of that. Another thing that we'll see in some wetlands is a thing called swamp loosestrife. Now, this is a native loosestrife, unrelated to purple loosestrife, which is in a completely different family. This is in the loosestrife family, which contains mostly native plants, not all, but mostly native plants. And this is swamp loosestrife. And there's a close-up look at it. And this plant was actually growing on the edge of Colchester Bog when I was there the other day. So it's common in wetland edges of all kinds. It doesn't have to be in a bog. Okay, and here's a cool thing that you can still see at this time of year. And I want to thank Tracy Sherbrooke for this photo, for letting us use this. This is a plant called willow herb. And you can see that this is a member of the evening primrose family. Like the evening primrose that I showed you at the beginning, but this one has very, very narrow pods. Fireweed is also in this family. And if you look more closely at this willow herb, you can see there's one of the pods that has broken up into 4 parts and it's dispersing its seeds. Okay, so now I can't help myself. I just love winterberry holly, and I've got a few pictures of it. I'll just whiz through them. But I just love this plant. This is one of the, like, to me, an iconic sign of winter in Vermont wetlands. It is just a gorgeous plant, and that's the plant that I have here behind me, because I always pick some to take it into to adorn my house during the winter season. I just love it. And this picture was taken at Elbert Dunes State Park in the wetland up there not too long ago. There's a closer look at it. And here's actually, this picture was taken, winterberry holly is commonly cultivated. There's a lot of different varieties, and it is commonly cultivated. This picture was actually taken outside of Starbucks in Williston. And what you see here are the fruits on the stem, but also the fruits are littering the ground below the plant. There's just tons and tons of fruits. And there is an arrangement from last year or the year before inside my house with the Christmas tree in the background. And here's the thing. We planted some winterberry holly at our home not long ago, and a couple of years ago, and it produced, this year it produced its first like real crop of fruits. it was just loaded with berries one day. The next day, gone. They were just gone. And what I saw during that day, between the time that I first noticed the fruits and the time they were gone, is the bluebirds discovered it. The bluebirds were just going crazy. They just went crazy for about 24 hours. Well, not for 24 hours, but the daylight hours of that day, and stripped them bare, gone. Bluebirds love winterberry holly. A lot of birds do, but particularly the birds that are that are related to bluebirds, robins and so forth, love winterberry holly. It is poisonous to mammals. Like if your dog gets into it, watch out. Be prepared for not good things happening. They won't die probably, but they'll be sick. So you have to be careful with it, but bluebirds love it. So this is pretty much what you'll see at this time of year, like a single fruit. All right, moving right along. So this is a floodplain forest, and I'm just going to show you one sedge. I show you one grass and one sedge. This is called gray sedge, very distinctive but rare sedge that grows in floodplain forests that you can see at this time of year. This picture was taken in the winter. Now we're just going to go into upland woods to close, to just some regular woods. And this is, I guess, not particularly regular woods, but this is the woods at Rock Point with northern white cedar growing on some rock. But you see in the background, there's hardwood forest and, you know, just sort of some rocky woods. And so things we can see in rocky woods, this is actually a goldenrod that is very recognizable, very distinctive. This is blue-stemmed goldenrod. It's got a narrow stem with just a few flowers on the stem, and it grows really only in the woods. It doesn't grow in the open fields with the Canada goldenrod and the tall goldenrod and all of those. But it's very distinctive and just grows in the woods. And this one is distinctive too. This is called gray goldenrod. It grows in the woods as well. And it's distinctive in that it just has this single cluster of flower groups. And it grows in kind of dry, rocky places in the woods. And here's another plant that grows in the woods. This is an aster. This is called world wood aster, WHORLED, recognizable in the winter. Again, it's a flat top plant, and this grows about, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 feet tall. Very recognizable in winter. And again, there's a close-up of it, and there are the seeds with their plumes still attached to the plant, not having been all dispersed yet. Most of them have been dispersed, but not all. And here's a lovely plant that you'll be able to see in the winter. This is a plant called ghost pipes. It had been previously called Indian pipes. And thanks to my friend John Jose, who took this lovely photo and let me use it. This is a plant that also is not green like the dodder. It doesn't produce its own chlorophyll, its own food, but it is saprophytic. It lives off of the roots of other plants. Here's another thing recognizable in the woods, very sort of delicate thing, but it is recognizable at this time of year, and it's called enchanter's nightshade. And there are the really fun fruits of the enchanter's nightshade with these little hooked bristles, you know, all a lot like a burdock. And a lot of these plants have similar strategies, right? They're built to be taken away, built to attach to a mammal's leg or whatever. And we are mammals, and particularly the fact that we wear clothing that these things can attach to. We're great vectors. We're great distributors of some of these plants. And this one has turned up in my dooryard because it comes home with me from the woods on my socks. This is another friend who loaned me this photo, let me use this photo, Ann Pierce. Thank you to Ann. And this is tall windflower. This is a plant that was growing in it sort of on the edge of the woods and on the edge of Rock Point. It's a funny thing because I tried to get a picture of this plant myself and I failed, but she sat in the exact same location and got this picture. And it's kind of a cool artistic shot. in the background actually is our trees, but that blue is Lake Champlain. And here's another thing that you'll see in the woods commonly. This is self-heal or heal all, a member of the mint family, very recognizable, and a very common thing in the woods, mostly along paths and so forth. It is a native plant, but really grows in kind of semi-disturbed areas. Another thing that you can see in the woods is witch hazel. This is a woody plant, but there are the fruits of witch hazel. This is something that flowers late in the season. Those are its fruits. And here's going to close with just a couple of green things, and then we'll close up the talk with some questions. But thank you to my friend Annette Seidenglans, who took this beautiful photo of sharp-lobed hepatica, and again allowed me to show it to all of you. So thanks, Annette. And finally, we will close with this one, which is something that you can see in the winter. It is called wintergreen. How about that for a good name for a plant that is green in winter? This is a member of the heath family. It has this, if you take those leaves and crush them, it has a lovely wintergreen odor. And there's a beech nut there at the base of the plant. So I want to just show you a couple of resources, and one of them is A Guide to Wildflowers in Winter by Carol Levine with illustrations by Dick Rao. This is a wonderful book. It was published a while ago, but it's really wonderful, very comprehensive book. And then there's Weeds and Wildflowers in Winter by Lauren Brown, which is a great resource. So those are two really great books. And another resource is Go Botany, the Native Plant Trust .org. And actually I put that on this slide too. So Go Botany is a great resource for learning about plants, and the Native Plant Trust is a great resource generally for plants. iNaturalist, a great way to get plants identified. It's both a website and a app. So a really great resource. The great thing about iNaturalist is that if you send an observation to iNaturalist, for one thing, it contributes to a database. And in Vermont, they have the Vermont Center for Eco Studies has assembled this thing called Vermont Atlas of Life, which is a part of iNaturalist. So that's a really great resource, and somebody will identify your plant or animal for you and let you know, and you're contributing to a database. So that's all I have, and we have just a few minutes for questions. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Liz. So I'll get right to it here with a few questions. Here's one, excuse me, from Kate, who asks, how does dodder spread its seeds? Where do they germinate? Not on soil, right?
The dodder seeds are spread. They obviously, when you saw those seeds, they're just these little round balls. The fruits are just these little round balls. So they don't have any mechanism for moving around. They move on water. They float in water, which a lot of water plants do. So they float around on water, and they grow in fairly deep water in wetlands, but where there is open water. So they spread around that way, and they do germinate on the mud. So on soil, yeah.
Great, thank you. And then a question here about if there are which seeds in particular, if applicable, appeal to birds.
Which seeds appeal to birds?
Yeah.
Most any fleshy berry appeals to birds. Really any the red berries of winterberry holly, and I said that those high bush cranberries didn't seem to be appealing to birds. But most fruits, most berries that have flesh will be appealing to birds.
Great, thank you. A question here, and I may be pronouncing this wrong. I'm not a wildflower expert like you are. Do you tend to find the white and blue vervains in the same habitats? This person has only come across the blue ones in the past.
You pronounced that correctly, yeah. And They are, the blue is by far the most common. Absolutely. It's much more common. They're found in similar habitats, but the white vervain tends to be maybe more in the shade, more sort of in a wooded location. And that one that I showed was found in a semi-wooded location near the Winooski River. So yeah, less common, more shady spots for the white vervain. And the blue vervain is found commonly in a lot of different kinds of open situations.
Great. A question here. Can wildflowers be transplanted, or is it better to grow them from seed?
It is, that's a great question. I'm going to just go back one slide. Wildflowers can be planted from seed, and they can be planted from plants. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but there's one really good way. Don't mow your lawn. Stop mowing your lawn. That's all I do. And that's really actually a great way to get goldenrods and milkweeds to come in, and asters and all kinds of other things, all of which are so beneficial to pollinators. I didn't even talk about it because there wasn't time, but milkweed is so beneficial to monarch butterflies. They rely on it for completing their life cycle, but they rely a lot on goldenrods too for their food. For nectar and pollen to feed them, and as they're preparing for their migration. So, but these things, honestly, in many situations, if you simply don't mow, those things will come in on their own. And people worry about weeds, about non-native things coming in, and that usually doesn't happen. It depends upon where you are and what the seed sources are. I think that the wild parsnip might be the most common thing that would come in a situation like that would be a problem, something that you don't actually want. But yes, so go to the Native Plant Trust, great resource for both plants and seeds. There's just a lot of different resources, and they can point you to different nurseries. There's local nurseries. There's the Riverberry Farm in Fairfax, which we have a relationship with, I believe. Is that true, Maya? That is a conserved farm. They do a lot of native plant propagation, so that's a great resource.
And I believe Land Ethic Vermont is actually hosting Dave Sorensen for a talk, I believe, at the end of March. So if that's something that interests you, Land Ethic Vermont should have more information about that on their website. Great.
And you've got Doug Tallamy, I think, right?
Yes, VLT, we're actually hosting that one. That's coming up on March 12th. That's a great,
definitely check that out. Doug Tallamy is all about this rewilding your yard kind of thing. And do check that out. He's a really great person.
Great. And we have time for maybe just one or two more questions. Here's one. Is Bowman's root native to Vermont, and what eats its seeds?
Spell Bowman's root.
Bowman. I
don't even know what that is. So I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm going to write it down. It's not native. It's not. I can tell you that it's not native in Vermont because, I can tell you that. But beyond that, I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's 8 o'clock on the dot, so I think we're at a good stopping point here. And thank you so much, Liz. This was really terrific. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we do have, like Liz mentioned, the event with Doug Tallamy coming up on March 12th, and a few other online events as well, which you can find on our website, vlt.org/events. We're doing a tree ID series that we have a couple more events of that. So we'd love to see you at those as well, and have a great evening, everyone.